Hello, everyone. Welcome to Chasing a Murder. Today, I want to talk about another woman that's attached to the Lori Vallow case, and that would be Tammy Daybell. I think if you followed this case from the beginning, Tammy Daybell is probably one of the most um, sensitized. Many of us, and gosh, a lot of us, our hearts pour out to her specifically. She married Chad Daybell, and together they had 5 children. Tammy Daybell is responsible for the majority of their success when it comes to family, raising the kids, and their book publishing company. Let's not forget their home that they own in Rexburg. Some of us have often wondered if Chad targeted Tammy not because he loved her so much, but maybe he did. We hope he did. But what he can manipulate from Tammy. Tammy was targeted and deemed dark, along with several other people who had been deemed zombies and now are dead. Lori Vallow's fourth husband, Charles Vallow, her own children, Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow, and Chad Daybell's wife, Tammy Daybell. For a long time, we had no idea the cause of death for either of these 4 victims, at least not until trial come along. A lot of us had a lot of speculation, of course, but we didn't have any solid information. And the thing is Tammy Daybell was still alive when Lori Vallow and her brother and Chad Daybell all accused of conspiring to take their lives. I'm having trouble with my mic today, guys, but they were buried in the backyard in her one of them in her pet cemetery. And we've all been wondering, what the heck did Tammy Daybell, Douglas, her family think about what happened? And so her sister, Samantha, took the stand last week. And it wasn't difficult to tell that she had a lot of pain and a lot of anger coming out as she testified for the prosecutor and the defense attorney. Tammy Daybell had already been attacked at the beginning of October, which they call a failed attack, which they suspect Alex Cox was the person responsible for that attack. Tammy believed that it was a teenager with a paintball gun and that it was a prank because police led her to believe that. And just days later, Tammy Daybell dies. So October 19th, this is not an unhealthy woman described by her family members and friends. She enjoyed clogging. She enjoyed doing Zumba. But according to her husband, he called and told Tammy's family that suddenly they woke up one morning and she was deceased. They claimed that she had a coughing fit the night before and that she had gotten up once to vomit. They helped clean her up and put her back in bed, and she said she was fine. And Chad says they fall back to sleep. And there are some interesting details that they shared with us that we haven't heard before. Nothing major, but interesting enough and enough to give you an idea that possibly she was even overdosing, this is my speculation, on Tramadol. According to witnesses, Tammy had hurt her wrist, so she went to the doctor, had an x-ray, and a doctor gave her a prescription of Tramadol. When the coroner arrives, she starts talking to Chad Daybell and asking him questions. And at some point, he mentions the fact that she had been taking Tramadol and that she had taken it all. So this was a very interesting little tip here, because if you listen to some of the symptoms that he described his wife as having, well, they all match up to what an overdose of Tramadol would be. She was lightheaded, fainting spells, nausea, coughing, throwing up. She didn't feel as if she was in her body. The pink foam or froth coming from her mouth. But Tammy Daybell wasn't big on going to the doctor. Chad Daybell said that himself. that she didn't like to take medication. She was more an herbal supplement type of girl. Why would she need to take so much Toradol if, she isn't one to take medicine for especially a sprained wrist? Well, this stood out to me, especially when you put together all the symptoms he described to the coroner. Many people who have followed this case have looked up, they suspected poison, and they look and they look, and they really couldn't find anything to match up with her symptoms. But was there a culprit to speed up the process and take her life? That's what a lot of people are also suspecting. Is it possible that Alex Cox might have smothered her just like he had J.J. Vallow? Did Chad Daybell do it? Here's the thing. For these people, Lori and Chad, these very evil, dark monsters, for what they're doing, and as many people that have died, it's been difficult for them to come up with physical evidence of murder. There's only 2 of the 4 that they have a cause of death for, really. Charles Vallow was shot by Alex Cox, Lori Vallow's brother. Shockingly, J.J. Vallow is said to have died. Cause was a bag over the head and tape over the mouth. But for Tammy, all they have is homicide. For Tylee Ryan, homicide. And if it weren't for a few people that were being very persistent in this case, like Kay Woodcock and Brandon Boudreaux, do you think these people would have been caught? I believe myself that they would have got away with this for at least a few more years. We listened to Brenda Dye testify, and for me, listening to what she did that day and what she heard that day, there were red flags for me. Why were there no red flags for her? The problem is their family, especially Emma, really didn't want an autopsy for Tammy. According to Brenda, she says that Emma Daybell, Chad Daybell's daughter, did not want to see her mother's body manipulated in that way, and she must have, empathized with her. So here we are. We're still trying to speculate what exactly happened to the victims in this case. How sad is this? I mean, are these professional killers? What's going on here? All right, let's listen to a few of the testimonies and let's, talk about what they had to say. Tammy's sister, Samantha, said that Tammy used to have a pet, she had a pet cemetery on the property, and she was very well aware of that, and she was aware of the fire pit. For those of you new to the case, this is where they found 2 of the 4 victims, the 2 children.
And when you talk about a pet cemetery, do you know where it was located on the property?
Yes, it was on their property to the side of the red barn. They had a fire pit that we did have marshmallow roasts at, and there was a fence with a little dog statue next to it. My niece's dog was buried there, and that's why they put the dog statue on top of it.
And that photo that you've been shown, does that appear to be an accurate depiction of the property as you knew it?
Yes.
So you learned that they were having barbecues in that fire pit. What you're going to hear next is a little bit about the finances of Tammy and Chad Daybell. Pay attention.
Do you know whose idea it was for them to move?
It was Chad's.
Did Tammy work prior to moving to Idaho?
Yes, she did.
What did she do for work?
At the time that they moved, she was the special ed secretary at the high school. And previous to that, she worked at the elementary school as a computer teacher.
Was she good with computers?
Oh, she was amazing with them.
When they first got married, do you know what Chad did for work?
He was working for the Springville City Cemetery, for the Parks Department. He was part of the cemetery upkeep crew. They helped prepare all the graves, and they took care of the cemetery, upkeep.
Was he also involved in ever digging graves that you know of?
Yeah, that was part of their job, is that they would dig all the graves that came through for any of the burials at the cemetery. Eventually, he came back and was the sexton at that cemetery, at that Springville. It was at the Evergreen Cemetery in Springville. And then eventually he was a sexton at the Spanish Fork Cemetery.
So a cemetery sexton, they don't make a lot of money. Today, I think they're averaging about $16 an hour, which is just a tiny bit above minimum wage. This is very important to note because you got to understand that that book publishing company, they're making some money, but they're not making a whole lot of money. And Tammy is pretty much over that as well. Chad is spending most of his time writing his books and writing with other authors. Very important to understand because when he meets Lori, you got to imagine what Lori thinks about him. And he seems to think that Lori is loaded. And Lori, on her marriage, she's not making any money either. So it looks like the two of them are kind of manipulating each other into thinking that each is worth more than they are. Next, they will talk about when Chad let her know that her sister had passed away.
How did you find out about your sister's passing?
Chad called me the morning that she passed away.
Do you recall what he told you?
He told me that she had been really sick and that she had been coughing all night, and he had gotten up and with a coughing fit around midnight, 1 o'clock, and had gone back to sleep. And he was awakened by her that morning when she rolled out of bed dead.
Did that make any sense to you?
No, because I had just seen her 2 weeks previous to that, and she wasn't that sick at all. She was very healthy.
Now, Brenda Dye will take the stand, the coroner, or the medical coroner, and say that she believed that Tammy passed away in between 12 and 2 in the morning, which makes no sense. Also important to note, Garth, which is Tammy's son, witnesses Tammy vomiting in the middle of the night. So I really do believe, since they say the Tramadol is completely gone, that there's a possibility that somehow she was given too much of this medicine. Will we hear the toxicology report? Would they be able to figure that out after waiting that long to exhume her body? I guess we can wait for trial to see what they say. Let's continue.
Did she indicate to you any activities that she was participating in?
Yeah, she was in a clogging class, and she was showing us some of her clogging moves, but she was also preparing to run a smaller race in their town, so she was trying to stay fit and healthy.
And how old was she?
She wasn't 50 yet. We were going to get ready to celebrate her 50th birthday.
Now, according to Tammy's sister, she says that Tammy comes to visit her quite a few times before she passes away, and that Chad was acting differently, and that he was actually friends with her husband, but Tammy would only stop by, drop off her birthday present, stayed around 5 minutes, and Chad sat in the car. Also, they talked about whether or not she believed that her sister thought Chad might have been cheating on her, because you got to remember that Charles Vallow had threatened to contact Tammy Daybell. He even sent an email. A lot of people are thinking that Chad Daybell got a hold of that email and deleted it before she could see it, but we don't know.
Did Tammy ever indicate to you that she had suspicion that Chad was having an affair?
No, she never said anything about it. If she did have any inkling, I think he probably brushed it away.
Did you notice any change in Chad and Tammy's relationship?
Yes, they stayed with us the first week in June of 2019, and something seemed off. They were very awkward at our house, and Chad wouldn't converse with my husband like they normally do. It just seemed really strange, and we weren't sure what was going on.
Now remember, Lori Vallow's sitting in that courtroom listening to her new husband's wife's sister testify how great Tammy is. Her sister brings up the fact that Tammy was having some problems with her wrist. So that kind of correlates with what Chad was saying.
And you found out the morning of her death.
Yes.
Was that October 19th of 2019?
Yes, it was.
When was her funeral?
It was the following Tuesday. It was really quick.
And did that seem odd to you how quick the funeral was?
Yes, it did.
Did you have any discussions with Chad about that?
Yes, I asked him on a phone call of why we were, doing things so quickly, and he told me that he thought that's what Tammy would have wanted, was to not have all the fuss. I also asked him why he was burying her in Springville instead of Rexburg, because their kids are in Rexburg. He is in Rexburg. And it's his spouse. I'm a sister. We're close. I like having her down there with me, but I'm not her, her husband or their mom. And
so Chad didn't only rush the funeral and the memorial. He was in a rush to just ship her away as far as he could from his presence. Usually when one is buried in a cemetery, they are buried near their beloved spouse, if they have one at their time of death. And so this doesn't make sense to her, and I don't think it makes sense to anyone. His excuse was, well, it's going to be icy and cold and snowy, and we're just not going to go see her often. What about the children?
And he said that he thought that it would be better if she was down there because it was cold in Rexburg and under ice and snow all year, and they wouldn't get to visit her as much.
Were some family members unable to attend because the funeral was so quick?
Yes. Several of his side of the family and some other of our family were unable to come because they were out of state or out of the country.
Did that include a son of Chad and Tammy's?
Yes, their son was on a mission in Africa.
He couldn't even wait for her own son to be able to come and make it to his mother's funeral. How selfish can one get? What Chad has put his kids through here is not one of a parent of responsibility and love. Obviously, the responsibility and love come from his wife, Tammy. Because as soon as Tammy's out of the picture, they're being tossed to the side and they don't even know it. And I really feel like if they would have stayed together a long time, Lori and Chad, before people figured things out, Lori would have made sure that his kids would have been next. That's my opinion. When Tammy first passed away, Chad introduced Lori to his children. The children seemed to like Lori, and Lori seems to like them. Now, interestingly, Chad had the balls to actually marry this woman 2 weeks after his wife passed away. How did he get his kids to accept this and go with this? I don't know, but he did. Don't think these kids know how lucky they are that these two got caught when they did. Anyways, Tammy's sister describes how she was shocked to learn that Chad had gotten married. What she thought at the time, 4 weeks after Tammy's death, was even more shocked when she found out the truth, and it was actually 2 weeks.
At some point, did you learn that Chad had been remarried?
Yes, we learned it was actually 1 month to the day of her burial is when I found out about it.
Did you later learn when he had actually gotten married?
Yeah, because I told my husband to find out because Chad was still speaking, he was talking to my husband at that point, and I said, you find out when he actually got married because I feel like that's very quick, even for somebody who's grieving. And you don't get married 4 weeks after you just buried your wife of almost 30 years. You just don't do that. And we found out it had only been 2 weeks after she had been buried, and we were devastated.
At some point, did Chad indicate or did you learn the name of his new wife?
Yeah, he told us her name was Lori Ryan, and that her previous husband had a heart attack. And so she had been grieving a spouse as well, and that's why they connected, was that they were both grieving the passing of spouses.
And did you end up learning another name associated with Lori Ryan?
I did. As any good sister did, I went to the internet to go see who this woman was. And
I'll object, Your Honor, to anything quoted from the internet.
And Your Honor, I'm not asking her to quote, I'm simply asking what she learned, and not for the truth of the matter, but as to why she did what she did next.
I'll overrule the objection.
I discovered her name was tied to Vallow, and it brought up newspaper articles about a man in Arizona who had been shot in his own home by a brother-in-law. And
So she's discovering some stuff online. Do you think she did this by herself, or do you think Brandon Boudreaux called her? We don't know. They don't say, but I'm suspecting that she must have got some sort of hint. If not, she was being a good sister. She was caring about Tammy and was starting to suspect something wasn't right. And boy, is she learning that Charles didn't die of a heart attack. He was shot by her brother Alex. I'm sure she thought, what is going on in Memphis? So you got to remember, you have Chad Daybell's sister-in-law's concern about this marriage. You have Tammy Daybell's sister. You have Kay Woodcock. You have Brandon Boudreaux. And Tammy's sister faces Chad and asks him, to stop lying.
when we asked him to stop lying about what was going on, because there was just so much information that had come to us from the police as well.
And it was based on the information you'd learned from your search of the internet and that the police had told you that led you to believe he was lying?
Yes, because I had seen, as I looked up Lori Vallow's name at that point, I had seen that it had listed, I'd actually seen an obituary for Charles where Kay Woodcock had commented that we will take good care of JJ, and I didn't know who JJ was. There was mention of another daughter, but it didn't say her name, and I thought there's kids involved, and I didn't know anything about who they were, so...
I'm just going to renew my objection. I don't know where we're getting this information from.
Well, I will sustain that. It seems to be coming probably from a hearsay source at this point, Ms. Blake.
After learning that information, did you ask Chad about whether or not Lori had children?
Yes, I did. I asked him in a phone call. I said, so please tell me about this woman that you've married to replace my sister with. And he told me that she had had a hard life, and that the reason why they hadn't told me her name was because she was trying to, stay away from the stigma of what had happened to her. And I said, well...
So you can see here, Chad's learning real quick to become a victim. This is what Lori's good at. Find an excuse why you don't tell the truth. Find an excuse that will fit the behavior. So Lori is pushing, I'm a victim, so I had to change my name. I had to be careful not to let people know my life, because I didn't want people to know that darker life. But they had no clue how dark it was going to be.
So please help me understand. So now that you've married her, are there children? Because I had seen the other information, and I said, are you going to be raising kids together? Mark will be coming home from his mission. And he told me no, that there's no children, and that they were going to be empty nesters.
So this is very important. So Chad has gone from his kids being one of the most important people in his lives to he's going to start getting rid of them. Even worse, Tylee and JJ are gone for months now. and no one seems to care where they're at. You know what I mean by this, not except for the people know. Not because they don't care, but my gosh, they're just trying to erase these kids out of their lives. And Tammy's sister is actually quite smart. She's already figured out a lot with just very limited information and working with police. Next, we'll get some different details from Tammy's sister through cross-examination, so Lori's defense. And sometimes they seem to be digging their hole a lot deeper than what it originally was. So listen close to what he asked her about the book publishing company and Chad's ability to take care of the family and who was actually the responsible one.
Tell me about this book publishing company that Chad and Tammy were involved with.
Yes, they had started a company together, Spring Creek Books.
And what did that do?
They published books that Chad wrote, and they also published books from other authors.
You hear her mention that obviously the sister was talking about this at one point, that they were publishing books, a lot of them for Chad, mainly along with other authors.
And so was that Chad's full-time job?
Sometimes, yes, but he was mostly on the side. He also, during some of the time, would work at the cemetery during part of this time that they had the company.
Okay. And at one time, did that company go bankrupt?
Yes, they did. They had an issue with some distribution of books with Deseret Book because of how bookstores work, that if they find that they aren't selling enough of them, they can actually send a whole bunch of inventory back. And since they were a small company, it caused them to lose some money financially when they sent, extra books back that they had already printed for them.
So did your sister have to get a job other than Spring Book Company?
Correct.
When it went bankrupt? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry if I interrupted you.
No.
And so did Chad get another job other than Spring Book Company?
I believe so. That's when he worked for the cemetery.
Okay. Do you know what year they moved to Rexburg, Idaho?
It would have been in oh my gosh, I don't remember the exact year, to be honest.
Around 2015, or is that too late or too early?
I think that's too early. I'm sorry, I don't recall the exact year that was.
Do you know how many years they lived in Rexburg before Tammy died?
At least 3 to 4.
Okay. So she died in 2019, so maybe they lived in Idaho 3 or 4 years?
Yes.
Okay. And so you felt like when Chad and Tammy lived in Utah, that you were close to them and saw them frequently.
Correct.
And when they moved to Idaho, that it became harder to stay in touch.
Correct.
Did Chad talk to you about his near-death experiences?
Yes, he did.
Did he write books about those?
Yes, he did.
Have you read those books?
Only one of them.
How would you describe his books?
Very spiritual in nature.
Were they well received? Did he make money off of them?
He did make some money off of them, yes. I don't know the exact amount.
And so, when did you first hear Chad talk about his near-death experiences?
I actually don't recall a time for when that happened.
Was it something before his book was published?
I believe he probably brought it up in conversation. Okay. We hold a lot of that stuff to be, personal. So when people talk about their spiritual experiences, I don't write that down.
And But yet Chad was not keeping his experiences personal. He was writing books and going to conferences.
Correct.
So he was trying to make money off of his, what he'd call a spiritual experience.
That's a complicated answer.
Yeah. So you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't write down your spiritual experiences and try to make money off it. But that's what Chad Daybell did.
That's neither a yes or no question for me.
Okay. And so these conferences that Chad Daybell would go to speak at, would you go to those?
No, I did not.
What were some of those conferences called, do you know?
I know some of them are called Preparing a People.
And he would go and try to sell his books there.
Yes.
And he would go and talk to others about his spiritual experiences.
I believe so.
And you would talk to Chad and your sister about what he was doing.
Sometimes, but it didn't always come up in conversations.
Was your sister going to these conferences with him, or was he going alone?
No, he went alone, mostly. Tammy didn't travel with him to those because she was working and raising children.
So she had a job, taking care of the kids, and Chad was out trying to sell books.
Correct.
And do you know where he would go to try to sell his books?
I didn't track him.
What would Tammy or Chad tell you?
That he just had conferences all over the place. He's been to Idaho, Utah, Arizona. I don't know what other states he went to.
Okay. But those are the three that you remember.
I do remember those.
Right. And did your sister help publish these books?
Yes, she did.
And so that was after the Spring Book Company went bankrupt. They tried to make a go again.
Yeah, they still tried to write books, and they found other distributors to, help out with distribution of their books or of other authors' books.
Okay. And so did you ever hear Chad and Tammy with you? Excuse me. Did you ever hear Tammy say, "Chad, quit trying to sell books. Go get a real job"?
No, I was never present for any conversation like that.
And so Tammy, rather than say, "Go get a real job," she was supportive of his book selling endeavors.
I would think so, yes.
In fact, you say she was a computer whiz. Would she help him publish these books?
Yes.
And was she in charge of the graphic design of the books?
Yes.
And so she was an instrumental part in getting these books from Chad's thoughts to publishing and selling.
Yeah.
And you say you've read one of them.
Well, one of the ones that you were referring to, but I've read some of his others, yes.
Oh, okay. And how would you describe the books that you've read?
Most of them are fictional, about what they feel like life could be like for the second coming. It's almost like the same kind of a genre as a dystopian novel that a lot of teenagers read, but his was more geared towards religious aspects, but it was all fiction.
Okay. And would he advertise his books as fiction?
I would believe so. As far as some of them not. It just depends on which book. He wrote several.
Were you aware that one time he said, "Everything that I've read is true," or "Everything that I've written is true"?
I don't know about that statement.
Okay. He never said that to you?
Personally, I don't recall him ever saying that.
Okay. Now these books are the content of them. It wasn't something that you were enamored with.
I'm an avid reader, and so I read lots of different things. I would read some to support him, but I also teach school, and I don't have time to always read all the things that get published and put out there.
Yeah. Your sister Tammy, did she believe what Chad was writing was true?
I don't know.
Did she tell you that it was fiction? It's really just made up stuff.
Well, a lot of it was based on what he probably felt would happen in the future, but it was still a fictional story with.
Okay.
That was interesting because the things that were affecting Tammy the most, like his future telling and conferences and all these things, Tammy wasn't sharing how she felt about that. This must have been awful, lonely, and depressing. Had Chad trained her to not talk about him? I'll hope we find out.
This, I think you said you never went to any of these conferences or seminars that he would speak at?
No.
And Tammy, as far as you know, did not go to any as well.
I'm sure maybe she went to a couple of them, but for the most part, she didn't go to all of them.
Now, you indicate that your sister was an empty nester at the time of her death?
I never said that about my sister.
You mentioned empty nester. That was Chad's statement to someone else?
No, that was his statement to me about him and Lori being an empty nester.
Were Chad and Tammy empty nesters when Tammy died?
Well, they still had a son that lived at home, and they had a son on a mission who would come home and live with him when he came home. They are older children, but they still had children around.
And when you say mission, what are you talking about?
In our Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, a lot of our youth go out and serve a religious mission for 2 years. And Mark was on one to Africa.
And so Chad and Tammy didn't have any minor children at the time of her passing?
No.
Okay. So all of her children were adults?
Were adults, yes.
When you talked about Chad being part of a cemetery crew, what is a sexton? What does that mean?
They oversee everything that happens at a cemetery, the burials of everybody's loved ones. They make sure that the mortuaries and the vault companies, they make sure that the hole is dug and they put in the vault, and they maintain the space so that it's, the lawn is taken care of, and, all the general upkeep that goes with making something stay nice.
And how long did Chad do that?
I don't remember the exact years, but he was there for quite some time.
Did he do that in high school? Did he start out doing that?
Yeah, he did. He started out as a teenager. He worked there with his siblings. It was a summer job.
And then as an adult later, he was still interested in that?
Correct. Because it was something he knew how to do, and it paid well.
Okay. Do you know if he took a job as a cemetery sexton in Idaho?
No.
Do you know why?
Do I know why what?
Do you know why he would not be looking for a job other than writing books?
I don't.
Now, these visits that you had with your sister that you've talked about, were those in the summer of 2019 before she died?
Which visits are you referring to?
June or July of 2019, a visit when your sister came and something was off with Chad.
Yeah, that happened in June. They came and stayed with us.
June of 2019?
Yes, they had come down from Idaho to celebrate Chad's mom's birthday. His parents live in our same town. And they stayed with us for part of that visit.
And then, was there another visit just a month later in July?
Yes, in July. But we didn't know they were in town. They were, they had not written a book, but they had published a book for another author. That there was a movie premiere tied to that book, but I hadn't heard about it. It was for the fighting preacher, and they happened to be in town for that.
At this point, he's talking about visions.
My husband has had a vision that I'm going to die.
No, she never mentioned that to me at all.
Would you be surprised to hear anything like that coming from your sister?
Yeah, I would be surprised by that.
Yeah. As far as you know, Tammy had a full life, a healthy, happy person.
Yeah.
She was not making arrangements to die.
No.
No. And so when Chad told you she was coughing and died, did you suspect something off?
I felt like, and I wasn't sure why, but I felt like something had happened to her and I didn't even know why. I had no reason to suspect Chad.
So here she tells you that she suspects that something is off, and she feels like maybe even her sister's given her some hint in some way. You know, we've heard these things where moms want to come back and they want to leave their kids messages. Maybe she was using her sister to do that.
I had no reason to suspect anything, but I do feel as a spiritual person myself that my sister was telling me that something had happened to her.
Did your sister tell you about being shot at?
Yes, they told us that some kid was pranking with a paintball gun, because that's what they were told.
And so your visit with your sister Tammy was after the paintball shooting?
No, it was before the paintball shooting that happened after.
Ms. Williams, can you please make sure to wait until Mr. Archibald?
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes.
You can tell that in her demeanor right now, she's getting very upset, especially with a defense attorney.
Okay, Ms. Williams.
Sorry.
When anyone's talking, please, I know it's difficult and stressful, but please wait until the question's completed. It just helps our court reporter to keep the record.
All right, thank you. Sorry.
No, sorry about that. So your visit with your sister Tammy in October of 2019, your personal visit face-to-face, was before the paintball incident.
Correct.
And so you must have talked to her on the phone then after the paintball incident?
No, we didn't talk on the phone. We messaged.
Okay. So in texting or?
Yes.
All right.
I really couldn't figure out where he was going with his questioning.
So after Chad remarried, did you meet his new wife?
No. They left for Hawaii shortly after we found out, so I've never met her.
There was also a trip to Knott's Berry Farm.
Correct, that they took over Thanksgiving.
Okay. So the end of November of 2019, Chad and Lori and all of Chad's kids went to Knott's Berry Farm.
So let's pause here. Now remember how they took Tylee to Yellowstone? This has always been something on my mind when I heard about Chad's kids going on a trip with them somewhere. And if police hadn't showed up on their door at the end of November, would his kids have been next? Because they're both considering themselves as empty nesters. We won't ever know, but luckily that did not happen.
Is that right?
That was part of their trip. I believe they, went to the beach and things too.
Okay. And how would you have learned about that?
Chad told us.
All right. Did you see photos of that event?
No, I didn't.
From Chad's kids? Did you hear from Chad's kids about it?
Yeah, they had told us about it. I think they actually, a couple of their kids showed us pictures of them at the beach, but I didn't see anything else past that.
Okay, and that was in late November of 2019.
Yes.
I'm sorry for the loss of your sister.
Thank you.
Strangely, the attorney apologizes to her about the loss of her sister. So, a lot of people are wondering, is this defense able to do the job properly for Lori, since it's such a very dark actions attached to her. And she's becoming a little bit open about what she has done in some ways or in some aspects. And he's already mentioned the fact that she believed that Jesus was on her side and that he will be coming to help her. In a nutshell. I don't know. If I was the prosecutor, I know how to make Lori tick, and that would be to say something's better than her. In some way, I would find a way to do that and see how quiet and easygoing she is then. What I've noticed is Lori is very good at keeping her mouth shut and then making these dark plans behind people's back. And when she takes aim, she doesn't take her eye off the target. It's the weirdest aggressive person I've ever seen in my life. She's not one to really yell, scream, cuss, or do any kind of face-to-face threat. Anything that she does that is threatening to someone else, she plans to do something serious, and she does it behind their backs and does it quietly. Occasionally, she gets the sense to brag, and that bragging to other friends of hers has really helped in this case. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and shut it down now because my neighbors are coming out and they're being really noisy, so I won't be able to record.